This is the first wound, the one you don't notice until it's already deep. You begin to second-guess yourself over the smallest things, what you said, what you felt, what actually happened. It's not sudden, it's slow, methodical. It starts with little corrections, gentle contradictions, a raised eyebrow that makes you rewind your entire memory. You say, "That hurt me," and they reply, "You're too sensitive." You recall a moment clearly, and they tell you it never happened. They laugh at your confusion while offering just enough warmth to keep you hooked. This is gaslighting, the systematic erosion of self-trust. It's not just about making you believe a lie. It's about making you doubt your ability to ever know what truth is again. And once that happens, once they've disconnected you from your own inner compass, they can control the map. Narcissists don't need to be loud to be dangerous. Their weapon is ambiguity. Their power lies in creating a fog so thick, you start asking them for direction even when you were headed the right way. Jung described this process well, though in different words. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, he said. But narcissists twist that mirror. They project onto you everything they refuse to face in themselves. Their shame becomes your guilt. Their rage becomes your irrationality. Their emptiness becomes your flaw. You begin to carry what they have discarded, and in doing so, lose pieces of yourself. This isn't love. This is psychic theft. And the most haunting part? You'll still try to fix it. You'll think that if you just communicate better, love harder, stay calmer, it will stop. But it won't. Because the goal was never connection, it was control. If you're constantly asking yourself, was it me? Then stop. That's the question they planted. The real question is, why do I keep doubting what I know I felt? That's where the unraveling begins. And that's also where your power starts to return. Somewhere along the way, "I'm sorry" became your instinct, your reflex, your shield. You say it when you're late, when you're early, when you're hurt, when you're angry, even when you're just existing too loudly. It's like you've learned to preempt the storm, to offer a soft apology in hopes it will calm the rising tension in someone else's voice. But here's the truth. This isn't humility. It's conditioning. Emotional guilt conditioning. Narcissistic abuse rewires your brain to believe that peace depends on your compliance. That if you just soften, shrink, bend one more time, maybe things won't explode. Maybe they'll love you again. And the worst part? They taught you to believe the explosions were your fault. That if they're upset, it's because you triggered it. If they're cold, you were too needy. If they lash out, you were provoking. This is how the narcissist flips the narrative, always placing themselves in the role of the injured, never the injurer. You become both the villain and the peacekeeper, the problem and the solution. You begin to carry guilt like a second skin. Carl Jung once said that guilt is always a sign of a conflict between the ego and the shadow. But with a narcissist, that conflict is outsourced. Their shadow becomes your guilt. Their mistakes become your apologies. And with every apology, your sense of self shrinks a little more. You stop asking for what you need. You tiptoe around truth. You learn to soothe their chaos before you ever tend to your own pain. But here's the thing. Genuine love doesn't require self-erasure. You should never have to apologize for simply being. If you found yourself saying sorry more times than you can count, not for things you did, but for things you felt, then something sacred inside you is being violated. It's time to ask, why am I apologizing for hurting, for needing, for reacting to mistreatment? The apology they never gave you, give it to yourself. For the times you silenced your truth, for the moments you absorbed blame that wasn't yours, for forgetting that love isn't supposed to make you feel guilty for existing. You walk away from the conversation feeling like something was taken from you, but you can't quite name what. Your body feels heavier, your chest tight, your thoughts scrambled. It's not anger. It's depletion. Being around them is like standing in the sun too long without realizing you're getting burned. The warmth is deceptive, the damage is real. This is the energetic toll of narcissistic abuse: chronic exhaustion, inexplicable anxiety, a sense of dread that lives in your muscles long after they've left the room. It's subtle. And that's what makes it dangerous. They don't need to raise their voice to drain you. A sigh, a silent glare, a backhanded compliment is often enough to collapse your emotional center. They pull you into their storm, then accuse you of being too sensitive to handle the weather. You start bracing for interactions that once felt normal. You begin preparing your energy like armor. That's not love. That's survival. Jung called it psychic vampirism, a dynamic where one person unconsciously feeds off another's emotional energy to avoid facing the emptiness inside themselves. And that's exactly what's happening here. The narcissist doesn't just want your attention, they crave your energy, your emotional reactions, your apologies, your tears, your attempts to fix things. They feed on all of it. Because giving you clarity would mean giving up control, and so they create chaos just to feel alive. You become their battery, their emotional generator, and the more you give, the more they demand. Until one day, you're sitting in silence wondering why you feel so hollow around someone who claims to love you. But your nervous system knows. It recognizes the cost before your mind can admit it. If every interaction leaves you feeling smaller, foggier, or more anxious than before, listen, that's your body speaking truth your heart isn't ready to voice. Real connection nourishes. It doesn't starve you. You were never meant to be someone's fuel. You were meant to be someone's equal. The moment you start needing recovery from a relationship, it's no longer love, it's depletion disguised as intimacy. And you deserve more than someone who survives by draining the very light you're trying so hard to keep alive. You finally accomplish something. Maybe it's a small victory, a personal goal, a dream you've nurtured quietly, and you turn to share it with them, hoping for celebration. Instead, you get a shrug, a joke, a backhanded compliment. Or worse, silence so sharp it slices straight through your joy. That's the pattern. Every time you rise, they retreat. Every time you shine, they dim the lights. Why? Because narcissists don't celebrate growth, they fear it. Your evolution is a threat to their illusion of control. If you grow, you might leave. If you succeed, you might no longer need them. So they preemptively sabotage, not always with open cruelty, but with subtle dismissals that erode your confidence like slow-dripping poison. It's not a big deal, they say. You only got lucky. Or worse. Why are you making this about you? The message is clear: your success must be small enough to make them feel big. Carl Jung taught that the persona mask we show to the world becomes dangerous when we start believing it's our real face. Narcissists are trapped in that mask. And when your authenticity threatens to reveal their fragility, they react with sabotage disguised as indifference. So you adapt. You start shrinking yourself. You downplay your victories before they can. You stop sharing wins to avoid the sting of their dismissal. Slowly, you learn that safety means staying small, but that safety is a prison, and it comes at the cost of your potential. Let's be clear. Love does not shrink. Real love expands. It mirrors your light back to you. If your partner, your parent, your friend, whoever this person is, belittles what matters to you, that's not love. That's control dressed as indifference. You were not made to apologize for your glow. You were made to grow, loudly, boldly, unapologetically. Anyone who feels threatened by that isn't your mirror. They're your cage. And no matter how charming, no matter how familiar, cages are still cage 7 when they whisper they love you. In the beginning, it felt like magic, like something out of a storybook. They adored you, admired you, mirrored you so perfectly it felt like finding home. But what you didn't know then was that you were being studied, not loved. They were learning your soft spots, your hopes, your wounds. And once they had the blueprint, the shift began. Subtle at first. Less warmth, more silence, a slight change in tone. Then one day, the adoration vanishes. You don't know what you did. You just feel it, the coldness, the pullback, the ache. Welcome to the cycle. Idealization, devaluation, discard, rinse, repeat. This is the narcissist's favorite weapon, love that comes with conditions, praise that turns into punishment. They lift you up, only to remind you they can drop you at any moment. Affection becomes a currency, Attention becomes a leash. You learn to earn your place again and again through silence, compliance, apology. But no matter how perfectly you perform, it's never enough. And that's the point. This isn't love. This is manipulation wearing the mask of affection. It creates dependency, keeps you chasing the high of the beginning, like an addict reliving the first hit. Carl Jung said that the narcissist is trapped in person unable to connect to their true self, and therefore incapable of loving yours. Because love requires vulnerability, presence, authenticity, all things the narcissist fears. What they offer isn't love, it's performance. A projection. You're not being loved, you're being managed. And every withdrawal of affection is a warning. Step out of line, and I'll disappear again. So you adjust. You quiet your needs. You try harder. You walk on glass hoping to be worthy of warmth again. But that warmth isn't real. It's bait. The real youth, messy, radiant, imperfect, evolving you, deserves love that isn't earned like a prize or revoked like punishment. Love is not a switch. It's not a strategy. It's not a transaction. If someone uses it to control you, they're not loving you, they're using you. And no amount of good intentions can disguise that truth once you finally see it. There's a silence in the room that feels louder than words. You're not sure if it's safe to speak, to laugh, to be yourself. You scan their face, read their tone, predict their moods like a weather report, but the storm always comes without warning. One wrong sentence, one misplaced sigh, and everything shifts. Rage. Sarcasm. Withdrawal. You don't know which version of them will appear today, so you become the one who adjusts. You bend, mold, shrink, shape anything to keep the peace. But peace built on fear isn't peace. It's survival. This is what it means to walk on emotional eggshells. It's not just tiring, it's soul-erasing. Over time, you stop asking yourself how you feel. Your body lives in a state of hyper-alertness, your nervous system wired to detect the slightest shift in their mood. You're not just emotionally invested, you're emotionally trapped. This is the psychological damage of unpredictability. When love is unstable, inconsistency becomes a weapon, and that weapon is aimed directly at your sense of safety. The human brain needs patterns to feel secure. But when affection becomes conditional, the brain interprets love as danger. That's when the fawn response kicks in. You appease, you soothe. You silence yourself, not because you're weak, but because your body is trying to protect you. Carl Jung said, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. But this isn't neurosis. It's adaptation. It's what happens when someone teaches you that their approval is oxygen. But love should never feel like holding your breath. If you find yourself rehearsing your words before speaking, questioning your every move, fearing invisible landmines, you are not overreacting. You are reacting perfectly to a relationship that has made unpredictability your new normal. But you deserve more. You deserve a homeonaut, a battlefield, a connection where your full presence doesn't ignite panic, but peace, where you're not punished for being human, but embraced for it. It's time to stop calling survival love. Because real love doesn't feel like fear. It happens so slowly, you don't even notice. One day you look in the mirror and the reflection feels unfamiliar. You can't remember the last time you laughed from your belly, danced in the kitchen, or pursued something just for the joy of it. You've stopped doing the things you used to love, maybe even stopped being the person you used to be. This is identity erosion, and it's one of the deepest wounds of narcissistic abuse. Because in order to keep the connection, you learned to dim your light. To avoid conflict, you muted your truth. To stay close, you abandoned yourself. And at some point, their voice got louder than your own. That's not love, that's loss. You lost your spark, your edges, your self-expression. You started molding yourself into whatever would keep them calm, engaged, or in love. But in that process, your inner compass was silenced. What you felt, needed, dreamed of, it all took a backseat to survival. And here's the most painful part. It's easy to confuse this for love. Because you were connected but not in truth, in codependence. It wasn't intimacy, it was enmeshment. a fusion of identities where your worth depended on their validation. Jung spoke of this deeply. He called it individuation, the sacred process of becoming your true self by facing what you've disowned. And that journey often begins with realizing you've been performing instead of living. You were trained to believe that sacrificing yourself was noble, that staying silent was strength, that your needs were too much. But let me say this clearly. Your authenticity is not a burden. It's your blueprint. The fact that you miss yourself is not a flaw, it's a sign. A call, a quiet revolution beginning within. If you've forgotten who you are, it's not because you're broken. It's because you adapted to survive something that never should have asked you to disappear. But now, it's time to remember, to return, to reclaim the self that once felt like home. Not the self that was shaped by fear, but the one born from truth. You haven't lost yourself. You've been waiting for your own permission to come back. And this is it. At first, it feels like fate. Like they see you. The things you love, they love. The way you speak, they echo. Your dreams, your humor, even your wounds, they seem to understand it all. You think, finally, someone who gets me. But what feels like connection is something else entirely. It's not resonance, it's reflection. They're not showing who they are, they're showing who you are, back to you. This is the mirror tactic, love bombing in disguise. They become everything you ever wanted until it collapses. Because it was never real. It was a performance, curated to lower your guard, earn your trust, and make you emotionally dependent. Narcissists don't fall in love with you. They study you, not to cherish you, but to control you. Every soft spot you reveal, every vulnerability you share, becomes part of their blueprint. And at first, it feels like intimacy. But intimacy without truth is just strategy. What starts as connection becomes confusion, because suddenly, the person who knew your dreams uses them against you. The one who once admired your strength now calls you too much. The one who mirrored your fears now triggers them. It's psychological whiplash, devastating, disorienting. You question what was real, and the answer is painful. Only you were. Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. That's what the narcissist is doing. Instead of growing themselves, they steal your light to reflect what they can't generate. And when the mask begins to crack, when their real self begins to show, they resent you for noticing. They blame you for the shift, and suddenly you're the one who changed. But the truth is, you've been in a performance all along, and now the curtain is falling. If you feel haunted by a relationship that felt too perfect, too fast, too intense, and then suddenly turned cold, this is why. It wasn't you. It was a mirror designed to keep you looking at them while losing sight of yourself. And now, you're finally seeing clearly. That clarity, that's power. They say, I love you, but your stomach tightens. They tell you, I'm here for you, but their presence feels far away. They whisper sweet promises, but something about the tone makes your skin bristle. This is the subtle hell of energetic dissonance, where the words sound right, but your body says something is off, and your body is right, because the nervous system picks up on what the mind is trained to ignore. You start noticing the inconsistencies. Their tone doesn't match the tenderness. Their touch feels transactional. Their gaze isn't presented scanning, calculating. You start to feel crazy. You wonder, why am I reacting this way when they're saying all the right things? That's the trap. Narcissists rely on words to maintain control. But their energy, unsettled, manipulative, disconnected, betrays the truth. You're not overreacting, you're sensing. Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But with a narcissist, only one person changes you. Because they aren't meeting you, they're managing you. Their words are scripts, their affection is performance, but their energy carries the truth. Detachment, resentment, emptiness. You begin to distrust yourself, not because you're wrong, but because their behavior is designed to make you question your intuition. This is why healing begins not with what was said, but with what was felt. Your body is your first truth teller. That tightening in your chest, that sinking feeling in your gut, that sudden urge to be quiet or disappear, it's not dysfunction. It's intelligence. It's your system screaming what your mind can't yet accept. You're not safe here. If someone's words feel beautiful but leave you anxious, confused, or numb, believe the feeling, not the phrase. Because love never needs to be translated. It arrives in alignment. And when the energy and the words don't match, listen to the energy. It never lies. At first, it feels innocent. They just prefer spending time alone with you. They say your friends are a bad influence, or that your family doesn't really get you. Slowly, without alarms, without confrontation, you begin pulling away. Not because you want to, but because staying connected starts to feel like a betrayal. That's how narcissistic isolation begins, not with walls, but with whispers. Subtle suggestions that the people who love you don't really love you, that your support system is flawed, that you're safest only with them, and little by little, your circle shrinks. One missed gathering, one awkward phone call, one lost friendship, until one day you realize you have no one to talk to and too much shame to explain why. This is no accident, it's a tactic, because isolation is control. When you are disconnected from others, your entire world begins to orbit around them. Your fears, your doubts, your hopes all filtered through one voice, theirs. And dependence grows not through force, but through silence. You begin needing them for validation, for comfort, for survival. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole through integrating all aspects of the self. But narcissists fear your wholeness, because your wholeness means freedom, and freedom threatens their control. That's why they fear your connections, because those connections mirror a version of you they cannot dominate, a version that remembers her strength, a version they cannot reprogram. So they sever the ties, one by one, not with force, but with suggestion, not with threats, but with questions that plant doubt where love used to live. If you've felt alone in a room full of people, if you've caught yourself hiding the truth from those who love you, if you've started believing that only they understand you, this is not love, this is captivity, and it is not your fault. Your isolation is not a reflection of your worth, it's a design. But even in the silence, even in the loneliness, your soul remembers the sound of your own voice. You are allowed to reconnect. You are allowed to reach out. You are allowed to return to the people and parts of yourself that existed before the cage was built, and you are allowed to tear it down. No matter what happens, it always ends the same way. You're the one apologizing. Again. Even if they were the one who yelled, the one who lied, the one who disappeared without warning somehow, you're the one left feeling guilty. This is not coincidence. This is design. The narcissist masters the art of reframing, of bending the narrative just enough that their wounds seem deeper, their pain more justified, their reaction more reasonable. They are the victim and you are the reason why. Suddenly, you're not defending yourself. You're defending your intentions. You're explaining, over and over, that you never meant to hurt them, that you didn't know your needs would trigger such a reaction, that you didn't realize your boundaries would make them feel unloved. But love should never require you to erase yourself just to prove you're not cruel. This manipulation isn't just interpersonal, it's psychological warfare. It's storytelling, used not to connect, but to control perception. They twist the facts, rearrange events, and weaponize emotion. And they do it so convincingly, others start to believe them. Sometimes, even you believe them. That's how deep it cuts. Carl Jung described the wounded child archetype as a vital part of the human psyche, a place where early pain lives, asking to be healed. But when left unconscious, that wounded child becomes toxic. Instead of healing, it demands. Instead of seeking support, it manipulates. And the narcissist becomes trapped in that cycle, using their unresolved pain as both shield and sword. They don't take accountability, they outsource it. And you, with your empathy, become the perfect target. You try to love them out of their suffering, But what you learn painfully is that their suffering is not yours to carry. If someone always manages to be the victim, no matter how much damage they cause, understand this: they are not seeking healing, they are seeking power, through guilt, through pity, through martyrdom. Love does not make you responsible for someone else's wounds, especially when those wounds are used to cut you. You are not the villain in their story, you're just the one who stopped playing the role they wrote for you, and that, more than anything, is what they can't forgive. But your story, it's still yours to write. And now, it begins without their script. You speak your truth, and suddenly they're wounded. You set a boundary and now you've ruined their day. They withdraw, go cold, explode, or sink into a silence so thick it strangles the room. And before you even understand what happened, you're the one apologizing. Again, this is how they do it. They make you responsible for how they feel. Not just when you've done something wrong, but when you've simply been yourself. Your joy makes them insecure, your needs make them feel abandoned, your pain becomes an attack, and they let you know it. With words, with silence, with emotional shutdowns designed to trigger guilt like a tripwire. This isn't empathy, this is enmeshment, where their emotional state becomes your problem to solve. Carl Jung warned that what we fail to make conscious controls us. And that's exactly how the narcissist operates, projecting their chaos outward so they never have to hold it. You become their emotional regulator, their scapegoat, their therapist, their mirror. They don't ask, "Why am I feeling this way?" They ask, "What did you do to make me feel this way?" And over time, you internalize that question. You flinch at your own emotions. You avoid truth to avoid reaction. You become a master at preemptive guilt, apologizing for feelings that don't even belong to you. This is emotional hostage-taking, and the ransom is always your peace. Real love honors emotional independence. It says, "My feelings are mine to manage, not yours to carry." But with a narcissist, feelings are weapons, tools of control, and guilt becomes currency. If you feel crushed under the weight of someone else's sadness, rage, or insecurity, ask yourself this: when did I become the guardian of emotions that aren't mine? Because the moment love becomes a job description, caretaker, peacekeeper, fixer, it stops being love and starts becoming a prison. You are allowed to feel freely. You are allowed to speak truth without punishment. You are allowed to exist without managing someone else's storm. Their feelings are not your fault, and they are not your responsibility. That is not love. That is emotional control disguised as connection. And you are allowed to step out of it without guilt. It feels like love, but it behaves like chaos. One moment, you're on a high wrapped in affection, attention, passion. The next, you're in free-fall, ignored, blamed, discarded. And just when you think you're done, they pull you back in with a text, a smile, a memory laced with warmth. It's not random, it's a cycle. And you're caught in it not because you're weak, but because your nervous system is responding exactly as it was trained to. This is a trauma bond, not love. Love heals, love anchors. Trauma bonds, on the other hand, are forged in the fires of unpredictability. Highs that feel euphoric, lows that feel devastating, and in between, a longing so intense it overrides logic. You know it's toxic, you know it hurts, but leaving feels like losing a part of yourself, because this bond has rewired your brain. Every time they withdraw and then return, your body releases dopamine, the same chemical tied to addiction. The pain of absence makes the return feel like relief, and that relief masquerades as love. But it's not love, it's survival. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And in trauma bonds, the pain is the consciousness. It's what finally wakes you up. You begin to see the truth hiding behind the pull, that you've confused intensity for intimacy, that the drama feels like passion because it's familiar, that somewhere deep in your story, love became something you had to earn, something you had to chase, something you only got in pieces. That's what trauma bonds mimic, a broken template from the past. And until it's healed, the cycle repeats. You are not crazy for staying. Your nervous system was doing what it knew, but now you know more. And with that awareness, you get to choose differently. Leaving won't feel like freedom at first. It'll feel like withdrawal, grief, emptiness. But beneath that ache is your true self waiting to be reclaimed. Because real love doesn't spike adrenaline. It softens, it steadies, it gives, even when it doesn't need to. You don't need to chase pain to prove you're lovable. You already are. And no cycle, no bond, no history has the right to define what kind of love you accept from this moment forward. There was a moment. Maybe it was small. A pause too long. A look that didn't match the words. A story that didn't quite add up. Something in you stirred. A quiet whisper that said, "This doesn't feel right." But instead of listening, you silenced it. You told yourself you were overreacting. You gave them the benefit of the doubt. You chose hope over instinct. Because that's what we're taught to do, especially when we've learned to confuse intuition with fear. Especially when survival once depended on keeping peace at the cost of truth. But let's be clear. Your intuition wasn't wrong. It never was. What failed you wasn't your knowing it, was the conditioning that taught you to betray it. Carl Jung taught that intuition is a function of the unconscious, a compass, pointing us toward what logic can't yet explain. But in narcissistic abuse, intuition is the first casualty. Because if you trusted that inner voice, you might leave. You might say no. You might not fall for the illusion. And so, slowly, your sense of knowing was replaced by a need to explain, to rationalize, to survive. Self-abandonment became safety, and for a while, it worked. You stayed, adapted, coped. But now, that whisper is growing louder. That ache in your chest, that tension in your gut, that instinct that once felt too painful to trust, that's you. That's your compass, and it's calling you home. You don't need permission to trust what you feel. You don't need proof to validate your knowing. You don't need another round of pain to finally say enough. Your intuition isn't broken, it was buried, and now it's resurfacing not as a warning, but as a lifeline. You knew early on, and now you know even more. This time, believe yourself. If any part of this story felt familiar, it's because you're not alone. Narcissistic abuse isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes with charm, with mixed signals, with love that leaves you emptier than before. But just because the wounds were invisible doesn't mean they weren't real. And just because you survived it quietly doesn't mean you're not deeply strong. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that journey begins here, in the naming, in the seeing, in the slow, painful, sacred process of returning to yourself. You were never too sensitive. You were sensing. You were never too dramatic. You were drawing boundaries. You were never unlovable. You were simply being manipulated to believe you had to earn what should have been given freely. But that ends now. This isn't just a story of what hurt you. This is the beginning of what heals you. Because the same intuition that once whispered in fear is now roaring in truth. The same voice that once quieted itself for peace is now rising to reclaim it. You are not the broken pieces they left behind. You are the one who stayed whole through it all. You are the one who loved, who tried, who endured, and now who rises. This is not about revenge. It's about remembering. It's about reclaiming your power, your worth, your voice, your life. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to become everything they tried to keep you from becoming. So, reflect, reclaim, reawaken, not because they said you could, but because you never needed their permission to begin with. This is your story now, and it's only just beginning. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.